The millionaire placed his order in French, solely to humiliate her. The waitress smiled in silence. What he didn't know was that she spoke 7 languages, and one of them would change his life forever. The restaurant, the Golden Maple, gleamed with opulent splendor. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like artificial constellations, casting sparkles on white silk tablecloths and polished silver cutlery. It was the kind of place where the powerful came to celebrate their power, where money spoke louder than words, and where people like Elena Dubois were invisible. Elena moved between the tables, her tray perfectly balanced on her right hand. She had been working there for months, always with the same routine: arrive early, clean, serve, smile, and return home with aching feet and her pride intact, because that was the only thing no one could take from her, her pride. That night, the restaurant was especially full. Business moguls, politicians, local celebrities, all laughing, toasting, completely ignoring those who served them as if they were ghosts in aprons. Elena paused for a moment near the kitchen, taking a deep breath. Chef Jean-Pierre observed her from his station, noticing something in her expression. "Are you all right, ma petite?" he asked with that deep voice that always sounded like a hug. "Yes, chef, just a long night. Every night is long when you work for people who believe money makes them better than you." Jean-Pierre wiped his hands on his apron. "But remember what I always say, dignity is priceless, and you have more dignity in one finger than all of them combined in their wallets." Elena smiled faintly. Jean-Pierre was one of the few who treated her like a person in that place. The others, including some colleagues, saw her as the quiet girl who never complained, who accepted meager tips and disdainful looks without saying a word. What no one knew was why she remained silent. What no one imagined was what she hid behind those dark eyes that observed everything with an intensity few noticed. The main door opened with that particular sound that announced the arrival of someone important. Elena instinctively turned and saw 2 men enter. The first was older, with gray hair perfectly slicked back, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Elena's annual salary. He walked with the natural arrogance of those who have never had to worry about anything in life. The second was younger, perhaps in his late 30s, with the air of an heir who knows the world belongs to him by right of birth. Both laughed at something, while the restaurant manager practically ran towards them. "Mr. Sterling, what an honor to have you with us tonight. Your favorite table is ready." Maxwell Sterling. Elena had heard that name many times. He owned a chain of luxury restaurants across the region, invested in real estate, and, according to rumors, was a man who enjoyed humiliating those he considered inferior, which, in his opinion, was basically everyone. "Sarah," the manager approached Elena with a tense expression. "I need you to take table 7. It's the Sterlings." "Table 7? But Marcus always takes that one." "Marcus is busy, and they just arrived. Go now." Elena felt a knot forming in her stomach but nodded without protest. It was her job, and she needed that job more than anyone in that restaurant could imagine. She approached the table where the 2 men were already seated, still laughing at some private joke. When Elena arrived, neither of them looked at her. It was as if she were part of the furniture. "Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to the Golden Maple. My name is Elena, and I'll be your server tonight. May I start by offering you something to drink?" Maxwell finally looked up, but not to meet her eyes. He scanned her from head to toe with that gaze. Elena knew all too well, the gaze that evaluated, judged, and dismissed in seconds. "Look, Liam," he said to the younger man, his son, Elena remembered. "How kind of them to send us the prettiest one." Liam let out a chuckle, though she probably can't even read the menu. "Right, father?" Both laughed. Elena maintained her professional smile, though inside she felt as if needles were piercing her chest. She had learned to endure these kinds of comments. She had learned that responding only made things worse. "What would you like to drink?" she repeated in a calm voice. Maxwell picked up the menu and pretended to study it with exaggerated attention. Then, he looked at his son with a smile that boded no good. "You know, Liam, I haven't had fun in a while. This girl seems like the type who barely finished high school. I bet she knows nothing beyond." "Here you go, sir, and thank you for the tip." "Father, don't be cruel," Liam said with false compassion. "She surely knows how to count. How else would she calculate the tips we never give her?" More laughter. Elena squeezed the pen in her hand so hard that her knuckles turned white, but her face remained impassive. And then Maxwell did something that would change everything. He leaned forward with that predatory smile he used in million-dollar negotiations and began to speak in French. Not just any French formal, technical French, deliberately complex. "Je voudrais commander une bouteille de votre vin le plus cher, mais je doute que cette pauvre fille comprenne ce que je dis. Elle pense probablement que je parle chinois, Elena heard every word clearly, every derogatory nuance. He had said he wanted a bottle of their most expensive wine, but he doubted this poor girl would understand what he was saying. She probably thought he was speaking Chinese. Liam burst into laughter, slapping the table with his palm. "Father, you're terrible. Look at her face. She has no idea what you said." "Of course not." Maxwell leaned back in his chair, visibly pleased with himself. "These people barely know English. French, please, you'd need a real education for that. One she clearly never had." Elena remained motionless. Her heart pounded, but not from shame. It was something different, something she had learned to control during years of practice, because Elena had understood every word, every insult, disguised as a foreign language. But she said nothing. "Not yet." "C'est." Maxwell pointed at her, as if she were a specimen for study. "She doesn't even blink. She's probably thinking about what reality show she'll watch when she gets home to her miserable little place." Elena took a deep breath. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind like a whisper from the past. True power isn't in showing what you know, but in knowing when to show it. Grandmaman Mireille, her grandmother, the woman who had taught her everything she knew, the woman who for decades had worked as a translator for embassies, but had never received official recognition because she had no university degrees. The woman who spoke 9 languages fluently and had passed that gift on to Elena since she was a child. 7 languages. Elena spoke 7 languages with perfect fluency: French, English, German, Portuguese, Italian, Mandarin, and, of course, Spanish. Each one learned in her grandmother's kitchen, on long nights listening to recordings, in the worn books her grandmother kept like treasures. But no one knew, because Elena had learned that in a world that judged by appearances, showing your cards too soon was a fatal mistake. "Well," Maxwell switched to English with a bored expression. "Since it's obvious you don't understand anything useful, I'll tell you simply. Bring us a bottle of the Chateau Margaux 2005, and make sure it's at the correct temperature, if you people here even know what that means." "Of course, sir. I'll be right back." Elena retreated with measured steps, her mind processing everything that had just happened. It wasn't the first time she had been humiliated. It wouldn't be the last. But something in that man's deliberate cruelty, in his need to feel superior by using a language he thought she didn't understand, ignited something within her. In the kitchen, Jean-Pierre waited for her with a worried expression. "I saw your face when you came back. What did those men do to you?" "Nothing I haven't heard before." "Elena, you don't have to put up with this. There are other jobs. There are no other jobs that pay enough for Grandmaman's medicine chef. You know that." Jean-Pierre sighed. He knew Elena's situation. He knew her grandmother was ill, that medical bills were accumulating, that Elena worked double shifts to survive. What did they say? Elena hesitated for a moment. The older one spoke in French. "He thought I wouldn't understand. He said horrible things about me." Jean-Pierre's eyes widened. "And you?" "I understood every word." A heavy silence fell between them. Jean-Pierre knew some things about Elena that others didn't. He knew she was different, special in a way she never fully explained. "What are you going to do?" Elena took the bottle of wine Maxwell had ordered and placed it on the tray. "For now, my job. After that, we'll see." She returned to the table with the bottle, presenting it to Maxwell as protocol dictated. He barely looked at it, making a dismissive gesture with his hand for her to serve. As Elena poured the wine with perfect precision, Maxwell spoke to his son in French again. "Regardez ses mains, rudes et abîmées. C'est la vie de la classe inférieure. Travailler jusqu'à la mort sans jamais rien accomplir d'important." He was commenting on Elena's hands, saying they were rough and worn, that this was the life of the lower class, working until death without achieving anything important. Liam nodded, adding in the same language, "Au moins, elle a un joli visage. C'est probablement la seule chose qu'elle ait dans la vie. At least, she has a pretty face. It's probably the only thing she has in life." Elena finished serving, maintaining her neutral expression, but inside, something was changing. A decision was forming, one she had avoided for years, but which now seemed inevitable. "Would you like to order dinner?" she asked in perfect English. "Bring me the best you have," Maxwell said, not even looking at the menu. "And I hope it's truly the best. I know the owners of this place. One mistake, and you'll be out of a job." "Understood, sir." Elena retreated again, but this time she stopped in a corner of the restaurant where she could observe the table without being seen. The Sterlings continued laughing, talking in French about business, about people they had ruined, about employees they had fired for fun. And then she heard something that made her blood run cold. Maxwell mentioned the name of a hospital, the same St. Jude's hospital where her grandmother was being treated. He spoke about an investment he was considering, about how he planned to buy part of the hospital and optimize costs, which in his language meant cutting services for patients who couldn't afford luxury treatments. Les personnes âgées et les malades qui n'ont pas les moyens d'une assurance privée sont de toute façon un fardeau pour le système, he said coldly. Lorsque nous prendrons le contrôle, nous fermerons ces départements non rentables. The old and sick. Elena felt the world stop. Her grandmother depended on that hospital, on those unprofitable departments this man wanted to close, on doctors and nurses who treated patients regardless of how much money they had. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from something deeper. A silent fury that she had kept contained her entire life began to overflow, but she wouldn't act impulsively. That wasn't what her grandmother had taught her. The right moment, she whispered to herself. Everything has its right moment. She returned to the kitchen, where Sarah, the manager, waited for her with a serious expression. Elena, Mr. Sterling has asked to speak with you specifically. I don't know what you've done, but you'd better not have messed anything up. Elena's heart raced. Had they discovered her? Had they noticed something in her expression that betrayed her understanding? She walked towards the table with firm steps, preparing for whatever was to come. Maxwell waited for her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Sit down, he ordered, pointing to an empty chair. Sir, employees cannot, I said. Sit down. Elena obeyed slowly, feeling the gazes of the entire restaurant on her. This was unusual, completely out of protocol. Maxwell leaned forward, studying her as if she were an insect under a microscope. My son and I have been observing you all night. There's something different about you, something I can't identify. And that bothers me because I always identify people. Elena didn't respond, just looked him directly in the eyes, something that clearly made him uncomfortable. I'm going to make you an offer, Maxwell continued. I need staff for my restaurants. People who know how to serve, who are discreet, who don't cause problems. I'd pay triple what you earn here. It was a trap. Elena knew it. Men like Maxwell didn't make generous offers without expecting something in return. That's very kind, sir, but I'm fine where I am. Maxwell's smile froze. No one told him no. Pardon me? I said. I appreciate the offer, but I prefer to stay here. Liam let out an incredulous laugh. Did you hear that, father? The waitress is turning down your offer. Maxwell narrowed his eyes. I don't think you understand your position, girl. I'm not asking. I'm telling you what you're going to do, and I'm telling you, with all due respect, that my answer is no. The silence that followed was so dense it could be cut with a knife. Nearby diners had stopped talking, observing the scene with a mixture of horror and fascination. Maxwell slowly stood up, his imposing height casting a shadow over Elena. You're going to regret this. His voice was low, dangerous. No one tells me no, especially someone like you. Elena also stood, surprising herself with her own audacity. Someone like me, she repeated. And what exactly am I, Mr. Sterling? A nobody, a waitress who doesn't know her place in the world. Elena smiled for the first time all night. She smiled genuinely. You're right about one thing, sir. I am a waitress, but you're wrong about everything else. She turned to leave, but Maxwell's voice stopped her. Vous regretterez d'être venu travailler ce soir. Je ferai en sorte que vous ne travaillez plus jamais dans cette ville. You'll regret having come to work tonight. I'll make sure you never work in this city again. Elena stopped, her back to him, her heart pounding. The moment had arrived. She turned slowly, looking him directly in the eyes. And then, in perfect French with an impeccable accent, she replied, Je comprends chaque mot que vous avez prononcé ce soir, Monsieur Sterling. Chaque insulte, chaque plan. Et je vous promets que le seul qui regrettera quelque chose, ce sera vous. I understand every word you've said tonight, Mr. Sterling. Every insult, every plan. And I promise you, the only one who will regret anything will be you. The expression on Maxwell's face was something Elena would never forget. The color drained from his face. His eyes widened with a mixture of shock and disbelief. Liam dropped his wine glass, the red liquid spilling onto the white tablecloth like blood on snow. Elena turned and walked towards the kitchen, leaving behind the stunned silence of the city's most exclusive restaurant. She didn't know what would happen next. She didn't know what consequences her actions would have. But for the first time in a long time, she felt free. What she didn't know was that that night was just the beginning. That Maxwell Sterling was not the kind of man who accepted being humiliated, and that the war she had just started would reveal secrets that would change not only her life, but the lives of everyone involved. Because in that restaurant, under the glow of the crystal chandeliers, a spark had been ignited that would soon become a fire, and Elena Dubois was ready to burn. The kitchen doors closed behind Elena with a dull thud that resonated like the end of one chapter and the beginning of a much darker one. Her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her temples, in her wrists, in every corner of her body that trembled with a mixture of adrenaline and terror. What had she done? Jean-Pierre was the first to reach her side, grasping her shoulders with firm hands. "Elena, what happened out there? The whole restaurant is silent." "I've never seen anything like it," I answered him. Elena's voice came out barely as a whisper, in French. I told him I understood everything. Jean-Pierre's eyes widened. "You answered Maxwell Sterling to his face. In French?" Before Elena could reply, the kitchen doors burst open violently. Sarah Chen, the manager, entered, her face contorted with fury and panic. "Elena, what the hell did you do?" "Mr. Sterling is furious. He's demanding to speak to the owners right now." "Sarah, he was humiliating me. He thought I didn't understand, and I don't care what he thought." Sarah interrupted her abruptly. "Do you have any idea who that man is? Do you have the slightest idea what he can do to us?" Elena felt the kitchen walls closing in on her. The other employees looked at her with expressions ranging from compassion to resentment. Some seemed admiring of what she had done, but most were simply scared. "Sarah," Jean-Pierre intervened. "Whatever happened, Elena is one of our best employees. We can't silence. Jean-Pierre, this is not your business." Sarah turned to Elena with eyes that dripped coldness. "You're suspended, without pay, until the owners decide what to do with you. Now get out through the back door. I don't want Mr. Sterling to see you leave." Elena felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. Suspended, without pay. The words echoed in her mind as she thought of her grandmother's medicine, the outstanding bills, the rent due in days. "Sarah, please, I need this job. My grandmama is sick, and you should have thought of that before you decided to play the hero." Sarah pointed towards the back door. "Out. Now." Elena sought Jean-Pierre's eyes, hoping to find some support, but he could only lower his gaze helplessly. There was nothing he could do, not against the manager, not against the weight of the Sterling name. With trembling hands, Elena took off her apron and placed it on the stainless steel table. She walked towards the back door, each step feeling like she was walking towards a cliff. Outside, the alley was dark and smelled of garbage and dampness. Elena leaned against the brick wall, letting the tears she had held back finally run down her cheeks. What was she going to do now? Her phone vibrated in her pocket. It was a text message from an unknown number. "You made a very serious mistake tonight, and mistakes are paid for. Sincerely, someone who will be watching you." A shiver ran down her spine. Maxwell, Liam, someone who worked for them. The message was clearly a threat, but what could they do to her that they hadn't already? The answer would come sooner than she imagined. Elena walked through the empty streets towards the bus stop. At that hour, public transport was scarce, and she had to wait almost 40 minutes in the dark, constantly looking over her shoulder, feeling that someone was watching her from the shadows. When she finally arrived at her small apartment on the outskirts of the city, she found her Grandma Mireille awake, sitting in her favorite chair by the window, looking at the distant city lights. "You're home early, ma petite." Grandmaman Mireille's voice was weak but warm, as always. Did something happen? Elena knelt beside her grandmother, taking her wrinkled hands in hers. How to tell her the truth? How to explain that she had lost the job that allowed them to survive? "Grandmaman, I did something tonight. Something I perhaps shouldn't have." Mireille's eyes, though tired from illness, shone with that sharp intelligence that age had not managed to extinguish. "Tell me everything, Elena. Don't omit anything." And Elena did. She told her about the Sterlings, about the humiliations in French, about the plans to buy the hospital, about her response, and the consequences that followed. When she finished, she expected to see disappointment on her grandmother's face. Instead, she saw pride. "You did well, ma petite." Mireille squeezed Elena's hands with surprising strength. "You did exactly what you had to do. But grandmaman, I lost my job. I don't know how we're going to." "Listen to me," Mireille interrupted firmly. "I spent my whole life keeping silent, my whole life being invisible, so that people like that Sterling could feel superior. I translated for ambassadors, for presidents, for people who governed entire countries, and none of them knew my name. None of them thanked me. None of them saw beyond the woman who served coffee and translated their words." Tears were now running down both their cheeks. "I don't want that for you, Elena. I don't want you to live your life in silence. You have a gift that I gave you with all my love. And that gift is not to hide it. It's to use it, to defend yourself, to defend others who cannot defend themselves." Elena hugged her grandmother, feeling the fragile body under her arms, the bones that protruded where once there had been firm flesh, the heart that beat weakly, but with unshakable determination. "I'm scared, grandmaman." That man has power. He can destroy us. Power without honor is just noise. Ma petite, and noise, no matter how loud, eventually fades. That night, Elena could barely sleep. Her mind replayed the restaurant events again and again, Maxwell's words, the threat of the text message, the uncertainty of the future. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the millionaire's face transforming from mockery to fury when she spoke French. The next day, the reality of her situation became even clearer. When she tried to call the restaurant to speak with Sarah, no one answered. When she went personally, the security guard prevented her from entering, saying she was no longer welcome. "I'm sorry, miss." The guard, an older man who had always treated her well, seemed genuinely apologetic. "Orders from upstairs. I can't let you in. But my things, my last pay, they told me they'll send them to you by mail, along with your termination letter." Termination letter, not just suspended, fired. Elena walked through the city in a daze. What was she going to do now? She had savings for perhaps 2 weeks. After that, she didn't want to think about after. Her phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize, but different from the threat of last night. Elena Dubois? A masculine voice. Professional, cold. "Yes, this is she. This is Mr. David Blackwood, lawyer for Sterling Group. My client wishes to meet with you this afternoon. It is a matter of urgent nature." Elena's heart stopped for a second. "Meet with me? For what?" "That will be discussed in person. You have 1 hour to present yourself at the corporate offices of Sterling Group. The address will be sent to you by message. I strongly suggest you do not fail to appear." The call cut off before Elena could respond. Minutes later, she received the address, an office building in the financial district, the kind of place where people like her normally only entered to clean floors. Part of her wanted to ignore the summons, but another part, the part her grandmother had raised to never run from problems, knew she had to go. She had to know what they wanted. She had to face whatever came. She changed into the best clothes she had, a simple white blouse, a dark skirt, shoes she had bought at a second-hand store, but that still looked presentable. She looked at her reflection in the mirror and took a deep breath. "I can do this," she whispered. "I can do this." The Sterling Group building was a tower of glass and steel that rose to the sky like a monument to the power of money. Elena entered through the revolving doors and found herself in a lobby that was larger than her entire apartment. The receptionist, an impeccably dressed woman with an expression of professional boredom, looked her up and down with that scrutiny. Elena knew too well. "May I help you? I have an appointment. My name is Elena Dubois." Something changed in the receptionist's expression. Recognition, curiosity, pity. "Of course, they're waiting for you. 27th floor. The elevators are to your right." The elevator ascended in silence, the numbers changing on the digital screen like a countdown to something inevitable. When the doors opened on the 27th floor, Elena found herself in front of another receptionist, this one even more intimidating than the previous one. "Miss Dubois, this way, please." She was guided down a hallway with walls covered in art that probably cost more than Elena would earn in her entire life. At the end of the hallway was a dark wooden double door. The receptionist knocked gently, and a voice from inside said, "Come in." Maxwell Sterling's office was exactly what Elena expected. Enormous, ostentatious, designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the city spread out below like a kingdom waiting to be conquered. And there he was, sitting behind a mahogany desk that looked like an altar to his own ego. Beside him, Liam, with that same contemptuous smile from the night before, and in a corner, a man in a gray suit who must have been the lawyer who had called her. "Miss Dubois." Maxwell did not stand up, nor did he make a gesture to greet her. "How kind of you to accept our invitation." It didn't sound like an invitation, it sounded like an order. Liam let out a laugh, but his father raised a hand to silence him. "Direct. I like that. Although sincerity can be dangerous when you don't have the power to back it up." Maxwell leaned back in his chair. "But I didn't call you to exchange pleasantries. I called you because we have a problem. And problems, in my experience, have 2 solutions. They are eliminated, or they are controlled." Elena felt a chill, but maintained her neutral expression. "And I am a problem for you? You have been since last night. You see, I don't care that you understand French. In fact, it's impressive, but what I do care about is that you heard things you shouldn't have heard." Elena's heart raced. The plans about the hospital, the business conversations. What else might Maxwell have said, thinking no one understood? "I don't know what you're referring to." "Of course you do." Maxwell leaned forward. "You heard about my plans for Street Jude's Hospital. Plans that are confidential. plans that could be affected if someone with the wrong contacts found out ahead of time. I don't have contacts of any kind. I'm just a waitress. You were a waitress. Liam intervened maliciously. Now you're nothing. Liam, silence. Maxwell did not take his eyes off Elena. Here is my offer, Miss Dubois, unique and non-negotiable. You will sign a confidentiality agreement. You will not speak to anyone about what you heard last night. In exchange, you will receive generous compensation, enough to pay for your grandmother's treatment for a year, and a letter of recommendation that will open doors for you in any restaurant in the city. Elena blinked. How did he know about her grandmother? How did he know about the treatment? I see you're surprised that I know about your Grandma Mireille. Maxwell smiled without warmth. I did my research this morning. I know where you live. I know where she receives treatment. I know how much you owe in medical bills. Knowledge is power, Miss Dubois, and I have a lot of both. The lawyer approached with a folder, placing it on the desk in front of Elena. Inside was a multi-page document and a check. Elena looked at the check. The amount was more money than she had seen in her life. Enough to pay for everything. Enough to breathe easy for the first time in years. But something wasn't right. Something in Maxwell's expression, something in the way Liam looked at her with anticipation, as if they expected her to fall into a trap. And if I don't sign? The silence that followed was heavy, laden with unspoken threats. If you don't sign, Maxwell spoke slowly, savoring each word, I will make your life impossible. You already lost your job at the Golden Maple. I can make sure you don't work in any restaurant in this city, in this country, if I set my mind to it. And your grandmother's treatment at St. Jude's. Well, let's just say that when I complete my acquisition of the hospital, certain patients might find their beds are no longer available. Elena felt nauseous. It wasn't an offer, it was blackmail, extortion disguised as generosity. You're threatening me. I'm giving you options. There's a difference. Elena's hands trembled as she looked at the document. The words swam before her eyes. Legal clauses, complicated terms, all designed to silence her permanently. She thought of her grandmother, of her smile when she said she was proud, of her words about not living life in silence. She thought of the voices she had heard Maxwell mention, the people who would be affected if he bought the hospital, the patients who would lose their care, the families who would suffer. She thought of everything she had learned throughout her life, every language, every word, every lesson about dignity and courage, and she made a decision. No, she said in a firm voice. Maxwell frowned. Excuse me? I said no. I'm not going to sign this. Liam stood up. Are you crazy? Do you have any idea what you're rejecting? I have a perfect idea. Elena also stood, looking directly into Maxwell's eyes. I'm refusing to be bought. I'm refusing to be silenced. And I'm refusing to be part of whatever it is you plan to do with that hospital. You're going to regret this. Maxwell's voice was pure ice. I'm going to destroy you and everything you care about. Elena walked towards the door, but before leaving, she turned one last time. Monsieur Sterling, she said in perfect French, vous avez opprimé des gens comme moi toute votre vie, mais cette fois, vous vous êtes attaqué à la mauvaise personne. Je ne me tairai pas, et si je tombe, je ne tomberai pas seul. Mr. Sterling, all your life you have oppressed people like me, but this time you messed with the wrong person. I will not be silenced, and if I fall, I will not fall alone. She left the office without looking back, her heart pounding, her legs barely holding her up. She didn't know how she was going to fulfill that promise. She didn't know what resources she had against a man with Maxwell Sterling's power, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. The war had officially begun, and Elena Dubois had no intention of losing it. What she didn't know was that very afternoon, as she returned home to hug her grandmother and plan her next move, Maxwell Sterling was making a call that would change everything. I need you to thoroughly investigate that girl, he said into the phone with an icy voice. I want to know every secret, every weakness, every person she cares about. And when you have everything, we will destroy her completely. On his computer screen, a photo of Elena taken by the building's security cameras glowed, and next to it, a photo of Grandmaman Mireille entering St. Jude's hospital for her weekly treatment. The battle for dignity was about to become a fight for survival. The walk home was the longest Elena had ever taken in her life. Each step felt like lead. Each breath was a conscious effort not to collapse in the middle of the street. She had defied a giant, and now that giant was preparing to crush her. When she opened the door to her small apartment, she found something she didn't expect. Her Grandma Mireille was not in her chair by the window. She was standing, leaning on her cane, with an old suitcase open on the bed. Grandmaman, what are you doing? You shouldn't be up so long. I'm looking for something, ma petite. Mireille spoke with a determination Elena hadn't heard in months. Something I should have shown you a long time ago. Elena approached, concerned by the effort her grandmother was making. Illness had weakened her body, but clearly had not touched her spirit. Grand maman, please, sit down. Whatever it is, I can find it. No, I have to find this myself. Mireille's wrinkled hands rummaged through the contents of the suitcase. Yellowed papers, old photographs, letters in envelopes worn by time. Finally, her fingers closed around a worn but carefully preserved brown leather folder. Here it is. Mireille sank onto the bed, breathing with difficulty. Sit down, Elena. What I'm about to tell you will change everything you think you know about our family. Elena obeyed, her heart pounding with a mixture of curiosity and fear. What secrets could her grandmother be holding? What did it have to do with what was happening now? Many years ago, before you were born, I worked as a translator for diplomatic families, Mireille began, her voice transporting her back decades. I had no degrees, but I spoke 9 languages. I learned them the same way I taught you, by listening, practicing, living among people from all over the world. I already know that, grandmaman. What you don't know is for whom I worked during the last years of my career as a translator. Mireille opened the folder and took out a black and white photograph. In it appeared a much younger version of herself, elegantly dressed, next to a man in a suit whom Elena did not recognize. This man was Arthur Sterling, Maxwell's father. Elena felt as if the ground opened beneath her feet. You worked for the Sterlings? For 5 years. I was his personal translator in all international negotiations. Arthur built his empire with my help, translating contracts, closing deals, facilitating communications with partners from all over the world. Tears began to form in Mireille's eyes as she continued. Arthur was different from his son. He was ambitious, yes, but he had honor. He treated me with respect. He even promised me that when he retired, he would give me a share of the profits from the businesses I had helped him build. I had signed documents, legal agreements. And what happened? Arthur died suddenly. A heart attack, they said. And when I went to claim what was mine, I met Maxwell. He was barely 25 then, but he was already the cruel man you know now. Mireille took another document from the folder. It was a contract with official signatures and seals. This is the original agreement. Arthur promised me 5% of the Sterling Group's profits as compensation for my years of service. But when I showed it to Maxwell, he laughed in my face. Mireille's voice cracked with the memory. He told me that a domestic worker had no right to anything, that if I tried to claim legally, he would use all his power to destroy me. And he did. He hired lawyers who invalidated the contract, claiming I had no legal capacity to sign agreements of that nature. They took everything from me. My reputation, my savings, my dignity. Elena took her grandmother's hands, feeling the injustice of decades concentrated in that moment. Why did you never tell me? Because I was ashamed. Ashamed of having been so naive. Ashamed of not having been able to defend myself. And fear, Elena. Fear that if someday you crossed paths with the Sterlings, they would discover who you were and harm you. But now they know who I am. Exactly. Mireille squeezed Elena's hands tightly. That's why you need to know the full truth. Because there's something else in this folder. Something Maxwell doesn't know I have. She pulled out a thick envelope sealed with ancient wax. During my years working for Arthur, I translated many documents. Some of them were delicate. Businesses that weren't exactly legal. Agreements with people who preferred to remain in the shadows. What kind of businesses? The kind that would destroy the Sterling Group's reputation if it came to light. Arthur made me swear I would never reveal what I knew, and I kept my promise while he lived. But Maxwell broke all the promises his father made to me, so I no longer have an obligation to keep their secrets. Elena looked at the envelope as if it contained a bomb. In a sense, it was. Grandmaman, are you sure about this? If Maxwell finds out you have this, I no longer care what happens to me, Elena. I'm old. I'm sick. But you have a whole life ahead of you, and I won't let that man take it from you, as he took mine from me. Elena's phone rang, interrupting the moment. It was an unknown number. She hesitated before answering. Elena Dubois, a feminine voice, professional, but warm. Yes, who is this? My name is Chloe Evans. I'm a journalist for the National Post. I heard about what happened at the Golden Maple last night. I'd like to speak with you. Elena's heart raced. How had a journalist found out so quickly? How did you get my number? I have my sources, but that's not what's important. What's important is that I have information about Maxwell Sterling that I think you'll find interesting, and I think you have information that interests me. Can we meet? Elena looked at her grandmother, who had listened to the entire conversation. Mireille nodded slowly. Where and when? Tomorrow, at Café Espérance, near the Central Plaza, at 10 a.m. And Miss Dubois, come alone and don't tell anyone about this call. The communication cut off. Elena stared at the phone, processing what had just happened. Who was it? Mireille asked. A journalist. She says she has information about the Sterlings. It could be a trap. I know. But it could also be our only chance. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. Her mind was a whirlwind of questions, fears, and possibilities. She read the documents her grandmother had given her, each page revealing a history of corruption, manipulation, and cruelty that spanned decades. But there was something else among the papers, something her grandmother hadn't mentioned directly. A letter written in French, addressed to Arthur Sterling, from a European business partner. The letter spoke of a secret agreement, of money transferred to offshore accounts, of political favors bought and sold. Elena translated every word, feeling the puzzle begin to take shape. The Sterlings had not built their empire solely with hard work and business acumen. They had built it on lies, bribes, and the exploitation of people like her grandmother. The next morning, Elena prepared for the meeting with the journalist. Before leaving, her grandmother stopped her. Take this with you. She handed her a small silver locket. It was your mother's. She also had your courage. Rose died young, but she lived without fear. I want you to remember that today. Elena hugged her grandmother tightly, feeling the fragility of her body, but also the strength of her spirit. I'll be back soon, grandmaman. I promise you. I know you will, ma petite. But if something goes wrong, I want you to know that I'm proud of you. I always was, from the day you were born. Café Espérance was a modest place on a quiet corner of the city. Small tables, walls decorated with old photographs, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee floating in the air. Elena arrived 10 minutes before the agreed time and chose a table in the corner from which she could see the entrance door. Chloe Evans arrived promptly. She was a woman in her 40s with dark hair pulled back in a practical bun and eyes that seemed to analyze everything around her. She was dressed simply but professionally and carried a leather briefcase worn from use. Miss Dubois, she sat across from Elena without preamble. Thank you for coming. Before we talk about anything, I need to know how you found out about what happened. Chloe smiled slightly. I have a source inside the Golden Maple, someone who witnessed everything that happened that night and who is very tired of seeing how the Sterlings treat people. Who? I can't reveal that. Source protection. But what I can tell you is that it's not the first time Maxwell Sterling has humiliated employees that way. And it's not the first time he's destroyed the life of someone who dared to challenge him. Chloe opened her briefcase and took out a folder. I've been investigating Sterling Group for 3 years. I have testimonies from unfairly dismissed former employees, from competitors ruined by illegal tactics, from public officials bribed to favor their businesses. But I've never been able to publish anything because every time I get too close, someone threatens me or my sources disappear. Disappear? Not literally, but suddenly they change their minds. They move out of town. They decide they don't want to talk anymore. The Sterling's power reaches very far, Miss Dubois, farther than you imagine. Elena thought of the documents her grandmother had given her. The letters, the contracts, the decades of secrets. Why are you looking for me? Because you did something no one else has done. You confronted him publicly. And not only that, you confronted him in his own language. Literally. That makes you a symbol. And symbols are powerful. I don't want to be a symbol. I just want to protect my family. I understand that, but sometimes the best way to protect our family is by exposing those who threaten us. Chloe leaned forward. Miss Dubois, I'm preparing a report that could destroy the Sterlings, but I need more evidence. Solid evidence that they cannot deny or buy. Do you have anything like that? Elena hesitated. Trusting a stranger was risky, but going it alone against the Sterlings was suicide. I have documents, she said finally. Documents my grandmother kept for decades, contracts, letters, agreements that prove illegal activities. Chloe's eyes shone with interest. What kind of activities? Bribes, tax evasion, agreements with people who operated outside the law. Everything translated and documented by my grandmother when she worked for Arthur Sterling. My grandmother worked for the Sterlings for 5 years, and when Arthur died, Maxwell stripped her of everything that was legally hers. Chloe leaned back in her chair, processing the information. This is bigger than I thought. Much bigger. There's something else. Elena took a deep breath. Maxwell is planning to buy St. Jude's Hospital. He wants to close the departments that treat patients without resources. My grandmaman receives treatment there. Do you have proof of that? I heard it directly from his mouth in French. He thought no one understood. Chloe took a recorder from her briefcase. Would you be willing to give a recorded testimony? To tell everything you know, including your grandmother's story? Elena thought of Mireille, of her tired but proud smile, of the decades of silence she had endured, of the opportunity to finally get justice. Yes, I am willing. For the next 2 hours, Elena spoke, telling everything. The night at the restaurant, the humiliations in French, the meeting at Sterling Group's offices, the blackmail, the threats, and then she told her grandmother's story. Every word was like lifting a weight from her soul. When she finished, Chloe put away the recorder with a serious but hopeful expression. This is enough to start, but I need to see those original documents. Can you get them for me? I'll have to talk to my grandmaman. They're hers, not mine. I understand, but do it soon. The Sterlings aren't going to sit still. If they find out we're working together, they'll try to stop us. Elena nodded, getting up to leave, but before she could take a step, Chloe stopped her. One more thing, Miss Dubois. Last night I received an anonymous call. Someone warned me to be careful with you, that you were dangerous, unstable, that nothing you said could be trusted. Elena's stomach churned. Who called? They didn't leave a name, but I recognized the number. It was from Liam Sterling's personal cell phone. So it was him. Liam had sent the threatening message the night of the restaurant. Liam was trying to discredit her before she could defend herself. And why did you decide to meet with me anyway? Chloe smiled. Because in my experience, when someone like Liam Sterling tries to destroy a person's reputation before meeting them, it means that person has something they fear. And I want to know what it is. Elena left the cafe with a mixture of hope and terror. She had an ally, she had a plan, but she also had powerful enemies who were willing to do anything to silence her. As she walked towards the bus stop, her phone vibrated with a text message. It was from Jean-Pierre, the chef. Elena, I need to see you urgently. I discovered something about the Sterlings you need to know. It's about your grandmother. Please come to the restaurant after 11 p.m. when it's closed. Enter through the back door. It's important. Elena read the message 3 times. What could Jean-Pierre know about her grandmother? Why such urgency and secrecy? Something wasn't right. But at the same time, Jean-Pierre had always been kind to her, always protected her. She could trust him. Or could she trust anyone? What Elena didn't know was that at that very moment in the Sterling Group offices, Maxwell was receiving the report from the investigation he had ordered. And what that report contained not only revealed who Elena Dubois truly was, it revealed a secret that connected the two families in a way no one would have imagined. A secret that if it came to light would destroy much more than reputations, it would destroy lives. The clock struck 10:40 p.m. when Elena got off the bus 2 blocks from the Golden Maple. The streets were almost empty, barely illuminated by streetlights that cast long shadows on the wet pavement. It had rained during the afternoon, and the air still smelled of damp earth and asphalt. Every step she took towards the restaurant increased the unease in her chest. Jean-Pierre's message kept replaying in her head. What could he know about her grandmother? Why so much mystery? Why meet secretly after closing? Before leaving home, Elena had hesitated. Mireille noticed her apprehension. Where are you going at this hour, ma petite? Jean-Pierre asked to meet. He says he has important information. The chef? Mireille frowned. And why can't he tell you over the phone? I don't know, grandmaman, but Jean-Pierre was always good to me. I trust him. Mireille had looked at her with those eyes that seemed to see beyond words. Be careful, Elena. In times of war, even friends can inadvertently become enemies. Elena had promised to be cautious, but now, standing in front of the alley leading to the restaurant's back door, her grandmother's words resonated as a warning she perhaps should have heeded more carefully. The alley was dark. The only light came from a lamp above the back door that flickered intermittently, as if it were about to go out. Elena walked slowly, her senses alert, her heart beating faster and faster. The door was ajar. Jean-Pierre? She called in a low voice, pushing the door open carefully. The kitchen was in shadows. The stainless steel surfaces gleamed faintly under the emergency light that always remained on. Everything was silent. Too silent. Jean-Pierre, are you here? A noise to her right made her turn sharply. A figure emerged from the shadows, but it wasn't Jean-Pierre. It was Liam Sterling. Elena's heart stopped for a second, before beginning to beat with uncontrolled force. She instinctively recoiled, but another figure appeared behind her, blocking the exit. Maxwell Sterling. Good evening, Miss Dubois. Maxwell's voice was soft, almost kind, which made it even more terrifying. How kind of you to accept our invitation. Where is Jean-Pierre? Elena managed to ask, her voice trembling despite her efforts to remain calm. The chef? Liam let out a contemptuous laugh. He's at home, sleeping soundly. He has no idea we used his name to lure you here. The message had been a trap from the beginning. Elena felt nauseous as she realized how easily she had fallen. "What do you want from me?" Maxwell walked slowly towards her, his shoes echoing on the kitchen floor with each step. "What I want, Miss Dubois, is to understand something that has been bothering me since I received a certain report this afternoon." He took an envelope from his inner pocket. "You see, when I ordered you investigated, I expected to find the typical debts, family problems, perhaps some embarrassing secret I could use to pressure you. But what I found was much more interesting." He opened the envelope and pulled out several documents. "Did you know that your mother, Rose Dubois, worked briefly for my father many years ago? Before you were born." Eleanor felt as if the ground moved beneath her feet. Her mother. She had never known much about her. Mireille rarely spoke of Rose, and when she did, it was with a sadness so deep that Elena had learned not to ask. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course not, because your grandmother made sure to erase that part of history." Maxwell smiled coldly. "Your mother was beautiful, according to the records, intelligent too. My father hired her as a personal assistant when she was barely 19. Mireille already worked for us then, translating documents. I suppose it was she who recommended her daughter." "What are you getting at?" "To the truth, Miss Dubois, to the truth your grandmother has hidden from you your entire life." Liam approached from behind, too close for Elena's liking. She could feel his breath on her neck, his menacing presence. "My father was a man of diverse appetites," Maxwell continued, "and your mother was young, vulnerable, alone in the world, except for her mother, Mireille. It's not hard to imagine what happened." "You're lying!" Elena's voice came out louder than she expected. "My mother died when I was a baby in an accident. That's what Mireille told you." Maxwell shook his head with false compassion. "How convenient. The truth is much more complicated. Your mother did not die in an accident, Miss Dubois. Your mother disappeared. She left one night without a trace, leaving you with Mireille. And the reason she left, well, that has directly to do with my family." Elena felt the world spinning around her. Her mother hadn't died. Mireille had lied to her all her life. "I don't believe you," she said, though her voice no longer sounded so sure. "You don't have to believe me. You can ask your grandmother directly. But before you do, allow me to show you something else." He took a photograph from the envelope. It was old, yellowed by time. In it appeared a young woman, beautiful, with eyes Elena immediately recognized because she saw them every day in the mirror. Her mother. But she wasn't alone in the photo. Beside her, with his arm around her shoulders, was a man Elena also recognized. Arthur Sterling, Maxwell's father. "Your mother and my father had a relationship, Miss Dubois, a relationship that lasted almost 2 years. And when it ended, well, let's just say the consequences were permanent." The meaning of his words took a moment to penetrate Elena's mind. When it did, she felt as if her heart had been ripped from her chest. "No," she whispered. "That's not possible." "Not possible?" Maxwell chuckled softly. "Genetics don't lie. Did you never wonder where your knack for languages came from? Mireille speaks 9. It's true, but my father spoke 12. He was a linguistic genius, a gift he clearly passed on to you." "You're lying," Elena cried, tears beginning to stream down her cheeks. "This is all a lie to manipulate me." "A lie?" Maxwell pulled out another document. "This is a DNA analysis my father ordered more than 20 years ago. He compared his blood with your mother's when she became pregnant. He wanted to be sure before making certain decisions." He showed the paper to Elena. Numbers, percentages, scientific terms she could barely process in her state of shock. "According to this analysis, there is a 99.9% probability that Arthur Sterling was your biological father, Miss Dubois, which means you and I are siblings." The silence that followed was absolute. Elena couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't even breathe. The world, as she knew it, had collapsed in a matter of minutes. "Of course," Maxwell continued in a casual tone, "my father never officially recognized you. When he discovered the pregnancy, he offered your mother money to disappear. Rose refused the money, but she disappeared shortly after you were born anyway. No one knows exactly what happened to her. Some say she fled, others have darker theories." "What did you do to her?" Elena finally found her voice, hoarse with tears. "What did you do to my mother? I didn't do anything to her. I was a child then, but my father was a man who protected his legacy at any cost. An illegitimate child, especially a daughter, would have been a scandal, a stain on his perfect reputation." Liam spoke for the first time since he had revealed his presence. "The irony is that all these years, my grandfather's illegitimate daughter has been serving tables in restaurants, cleaning houses, surviving on scraps, while we inherited everything that technically also belongs to you. Shut up, Liam. Maxwell shot him a warning glance. We're not here to discuss inheritances. Then what are we here for? Elena asked, wiping away her tears furiously. To torture me with secrets from the past? To watch me crumble? We're here to offer you a deal. Maxwell put the documents back in the envelope. Now that you know the truth, you have two options. The first, you keep silent about everything. About what you heard in the restaurant, about the hospital plans, about these documents. In exchange, I will ensure your grandmother receives the best possible medical treatment at no cost, and you will receive a monthly amount that will allow you to live comfortably. And the second option? The second option is that you continue with your little crusade for justice, that you talk to journalists, that you try to expose me. But if you choose that path, I will not only destroy your life and your grandmother's, I will also make sure the world knows you are an illegitimate sterling, looking only for money. I will turn your story of struggle into a story of greed. And believe me, I have the resources to do it. Elena stared at him. This man was her brother. They shared blood, they shared a father, but they shared nothing else. He was everything she despised, everything her grandmother had taught her to reject. Why? She asked softly. Why so much hate? If what you say is true, we're family. For the first time, something changed in Maxwell's expression. A shadow crossed his face. Something that could have been pain or resentment. Family. My father spent his last years obsessed with you, not with his legitimate children, not with the empire he built, with the daughter he had abandoned. Before he died, he confessed to me that the biggest mistake of his life was not having recognized you, that you were his true heir, not me. The bitterness in his voice was palpable. So don't talk to me about family, Miss Dubois. You stole my father's love without even knowing it, and now you want to steal everything else from me. I don't want anything from you, Elena said firmly. I just want justice for my grandmother, for my mother, for all the people your family has destroyed. Then you chose the second option. Maxwell signaled, and two men appeared from the shadow's bodyguards by their appearance. Large, intimidating, with empty expressions of professionals accustomed to unpleasant jobs. Escort Miss Dubois home. Make sure she understands the consequences of her decisions. Elena felt panic grow in her chest. What were they going to do to her? What were they going to do to her grandmother? But before the bodyguards could touch her, a voice echoed from the kitchen door. Stop! Police! Nobody move! The lights flashed on, momentarily blinding everyone. Elena blinked, trying to understand what was happening. Several officers entered through different doors, weapons in hand, shouting orders, and behind them, with an expression of contained triumph, was Chloe Evans. What the hell is this? Maxwell roared. This, Mr. Sterling, is the end of your reign. Chloe approached with a microphone in her hand. Everything you just said was recorded. Every threat, every confession, every detail about what your family did to Rose Dubois. That's illegal. You can't record without my consent. Actually, we can. When there is suspicion of criminal activity, authorities can authorize surveillance. And thanks to certain documents we received this morning, we had more than enough suspicion. Maxwell turned towards Elena with murderous fury in his eyes. You knew this was going to happen? No. Elena shook her head, as surprised as he was. I didn't know anything. She's telling the truth, Chloe intervened. Elena didn't know about the operation, but someone else did. Someone who has been waiting years to see justice. From behind the officers emerged a figure that made Elena's heart stop. Grandmaman Mireille. Her grandmother walked slowly, leaning on her cane, but with her head held high, and her eyes shining with a strength Elena had never seen. Grandmaman, how, when you left tonight, I knew something was wrong. Mireille spoke with a clear and firm voice. I called Miss Evans. She contacted the authorities, and together we prepared this. She approached Maxwell, looking him directly in the eyes without an ounce of fear. For 25 years I kept silent. For 25 years I carried the pain of losing my daughter because of your father. But tonight I heard everything you said, and now the world will hear it too. Maxwell Sterling, for the first time in his life, was speechless. The officers began to handcuff him while he shouted about lawyers and lawsuits. Liam tried to flee but was stopped before reaching the door. Elena ran to her grandmother, hugging her tightly. Grandmaman, is everything he said about my mother true? About Arthur? Mireille held her, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. It's true, ma petite. It's all true. And the time has come for you to know the whole story. Outside, the sirens of more patrol cars illuminated the night. Inside, two women embraced as decades of secrets finally came to light. The battle was not over. It was just beginning. But for the first time, Elena felt she was not alone. and that made all the difference. The central police station was an old building that smelled of cold coffee and old papers. Elena was sitting in a waiting room with her grandmother, both wrapped in blankets that some kind officer had offered them. Outside, dawn was beginning to paint the sky with pink and orange hues, but neither of them had slept. Chloe Evans had spent the last few hours giving statements, presenting evidence, coordinating with the prosecutors who had arrived urgently when they learned the magnitude of the case. Maxwell and Liam Sterling were in separate cells, their lawyers already working frantically to secure their bail. But for the moment they were behind bars, and that was enough. Grandmaman, Elena finally broke the silence that had enveloped them for hours. I need to know everything about my mother, about Arthur, about what really happened. Mireille closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength from somewhere deep within her soul. When she opened them, there was in them a mixture of pain and relief that Elena had never seen. Your mother was the light of my life, Elena. Rose Dubois had your same smile, your same determination, your same inner fire. When I looked at her, I saw all the good the world could offer. Her voice trembled, but she continued. I had been working for the Sterlings for 3 years when Rose turned 19. She needed a job, and I thought I could protect her if she worked with me. How wrong I was. Elena took her grandmother's hand, feeling the fragile bones beneath the wrinkled skin. Arthur noticed her from day one. It was impossible not to notice her. Rose had that ability to light up any room she entered. At first, I thought his attentions were simply kindness from an employer to a new employee, but soon I realized it was something more. She loved him. Mireille sighed deeply. Rose believed she loved him, and perhaps, in his twisted way, Arthur also loved her. But the love of men like him always comes with conditions, with limits, with secrets. She paused, looking towards the window where the rising sun began to filter golden light. When Rose discovered she was pregnant, Arthur changed completely. The charming and attentive man became cold, calculating. He offered her money to not have the baby. Rose refused. He offered her more money to disappear, to go far away and never contact the Sterling family. Rose also refused that. What did she want? She wanted Arthur to recognize his daughter, to give you his name, his protection, your rightful place in the world. She was naive, my Rose. She thought love could conquer the pride and ambition of a man like him. Tears began to stream down Mireille's cheeks. Arthur's wife, Eleanor, discovered the truth shortly after you were born. I don't know how she found out, but she did. And Eleanor was a strong-willed woman. She gave Arthur an ultimatum. Either Rose disappeared from their lives forever, or she would destroy him publicly, ruin his reputation, his business, everything he had built. And what did he do? He chose his empire over his daughter, over you. He told Rose that she had to leave, that she could never contact him again, that she could never reveal who her baby's father was. He offered her a considerable amount of money, enough to start a new life in another country. Elena felt a knot in her throat. But you said she refused the money. She refused it. Rose had pride, Elena. Too much pride for her own good. She said she wanted nothing from a man capable of abandoning his own blood, that she preferred to raise her daughter in poverty, rather than accept crumbs from someone without honor. Mireille paused, her breathing becoming more difficult. A week after that conversation, Rose disappeared. Elena's heart stopped. Disappeared? What do you mean she disappeared? Exactly that. One night, after putting you to sleep in your crib, she left the apartment saying she was going to buy milk. She never returned. Did you look for her? I looked for her for years, Elena. I went to the police, hired private investigators with the little money I had. I put up posters all over the city. No one found anything. It was as if the earth had swallowed her. Elena felt as if the air wasn't reaching her lungs. Do you think Arthur had something to do with it? Mireille took a moment to respond. For a long time, I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to think that the man my daughter had fallen in love with was capable of something like that. But over the years, as I watched the Sterlings destroy anyone who stood in their way, I began to have doubts. Doubts that became suspicions. Suspicions that became certainty. Why did you never tell me? Because I wanted to protect you. Mireille took Elena's face in her hands. If you had known the truth, you would have looked for the Sterlings. You would have demanded answers, and they would have destroyed you as they destroyed everyone else. I preferred you to believe your mother died in an accident. At least that way, you could have peace. Peace? Elena stood up abruptly, frustration and pain mixing in her voice. Do you think I lived in peace, believing my mother was dead? Do you think it didn't hurt every holiday without her? Every birthday, every important moment of my life where she should have been? I know, ma petite, I know, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry I lied to you. I'm sorry I wasn't stronger, braver. I'm sorry for everything." Elena looked at her grandmother, this woman who had sacrificed everything to raise her, who had worked herself sick to give her a future, who had carried impossible secrets for decades, and despite the pain, despite the betrayal she felt, she could not hate her. She knelt before her, taking her hands again. "I forgive you, grandmaman, but I need to know one more thing. Do you think my mother is still alive?" Mireille looked at her with eyes full of a hope she had kept hidden for years. "I don't know, Elena, but they never found a body. There was never proof she was dead. And there's something I never told you because I didn't want to give you false hope." "What?" 5 years ago, I received a letter. No return address, no signature. It just said, "She's fine, don't look for her." It was written in French. Elena felt a shiver run down her spine. French? Why in French? Rose spoke French perfectly. I taught her when she was a child, just like I taught you. It was our secret language, the one we used when we didn't want anyone else to understand. Did you keep the letter? It's in the leather folder, with all the other documents. The door to the room opened, and Chloe Evans entered, looking exhausted but satisfied. "Ladies, we have news. The prosecutor has decided to file formal charges against Maxwell and Liam Sterling, extortion, threats, and we are investigating possible connections to the disappearance of Rose Dubois." Elena stood up immediately. "They can investigate that? After so many years? There is no statute of limitations for certain crimes, Miss Dubois, and with the recorded confessions from last night, we have enough to reopen your mother's case." Mireille let out a contained sob. "Really? After all this time? Really, madame?" Chloe approached, placing a gentle hand on the old woman's shoulder. "But we need your full cooperation. All the documents, all the letters, everything you have saved, you'll have it." Mireille nodded. "Everything, every paper, every photo, every memory. If it helps find my Rose, I will hand it over without hesitation." Chloe looked at Elena with a serious expression. "There's something else you should know." During the interrogation, Liam started talking. It seems he wants to negotiate a reduced sentence in exchange for information. "What kind of information?" "He says he knows what really happened to Rose Dubois. He says his grandfather Arthur told him the truth before he died, and that Maxwell also knows, but has never admitted it." The world seemed to stop. Elena felt her knees weaken. "Liam knows where my mother is. We're not sure yet. He could be lying to get a better deal. But the prosecutors are going to interrogate him further. If there's any truth to what he says, we'll find it." The following hours were a whirlwind of statements, signatures, legal procedures that Elena barely understood. Mireille had to be taken to the hospital for a checkup due to the stress of the night, but the doctors confirmed she was stable. While waiting for news in the hospital hallway, Elena received an unexpected call. "Miss Dubois, this is Jean-Pierre. I just heard about what happened last night. Are you all right, Chef Jean-Pierre?" Elena felt relief at hearing a familiar voice. "Yes, I'm fine. It was a long night. They told me they used my name to set a trap for you. I'm so sorry. It's not your fault. You had no way of knowing." There was a pause on the line. "Miss Dubois, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you a long time ago, but I was afraid." "What are you talking about?" "I knew your mother, Rose. We worked together briefly many years ago in another restaurant before she started working for the Sterlings." Elena almost dropped the phone. "You knew my mother?" "Yes. She was an extraordinary woman, kind, intelligent, full of life. When I learned who you were, when I first saw you at the Golden Maple, I almost couldn't believe it. You're identical to her, Miss Dubois. Identical. Why did you never tell me?" "Because Rose made me promise that if I ever met her daughter, I wouldn't tell her anything until the time was right. She told me that someday, when you were ready, the truth would come to light, and that when that happened, I would have to tell you something important." Elena's heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. "What? Not over the phone. I need to see you in person. You can come to the restaurant tomorrow morning before it opens. There's something your mother left for you. Something I've kept for over 20 years. My mother left something for me? Yes. And I think it's the key to finding her." The call ended, leaving Elena with more questions than answers. What had her mother left her? How could Jean-Pierre have kept such a secret for so long? And why had Rose trusted him that night? As Mireille slept in her hospital bed connected to monitors that beeped softly, Elena stayed awake looking out the window. The city glittered with thousands of lights, each representing a life, a story, a secret. Somewhere in that world, perhaps her mother still existed, perhaps she had spent all these years hidden, waiting for the right moment to return. Or perhaps the letter had been a cruel joke, a false hope designed to torture. It didn't matter. Elena would find the truth. whatever the cost. Her phone vibrated with a message from Chloe. Liam spoke. Says Rose didn't die. Says Arthur sent her away to Europe with a new identity. Says there's proof in a safety deposit box only Maxwell can open. We'll try to get a warrant tomorrow. This isn't over, Elena. It's just beginning. Elena read the message 3 times, letting the words penetrate her mind. Her mother was alive, or at least had been alive when Arthur sent her away. Europe, a new identity, a safety deposit box with proof. And Jean-Pierre had something her mother had left her, something he had kept for over 2 decades waiting for this moment. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fit, but the complete picture was still blurry, incomplete, full of shadows and mysteries. Elena looked at her sleeping grandmother, this woman who had sacrificed everything for her, who had carried impossible secrets to protect her. "I'm going to find her, Grandmaman," she whispered in the darkness. "I'm going to find Mom. I promise you." Outside, the night continued its course, indifferent to the human dramas unfolding under its blanket of stars. But within Elena, something had changed permanently. She was no longer just a waitress fighting to survive. She was a daughter looking for her mother, a granddaughter honoring her grandmother's sacrifice, a woman reclaiming her truth, and nothing and no one was going to stop her. Not even the ghosts of the past that still remained to be discovered, because in the Sterling safety deposit box awaited secrets no one had imagined. Secrets that would not only change Elena's life, they would change everything she thought she knew about her family, about the Sterlings, and about the night Rose Dubois disappeared forever. The sun was barely beginning to rise when Elena arrived at the Golden Maple. The restaurant looked different in the morning light, stripped of its glamour, revealing the cracks in the walls and the wear of the years, as if the building itself knew it no longer had to feign perfection. Jean-Pierre waited for her at the back door, the same place where days earlier her nightmare had begun. But this time the chef had a different expression. It wasn't worry or fear, it was something Elena couldn't fully identify. Nostalgia, anticipation, guilt. "Thank you for coming, Miss Dubois." His voice was softer than usual. "I know that after everything that happened here, this place must bring back bad memories. Memories don't scare me, chef. What scares me is not knowing the truth." Jean-Pierre nodded slowly and led her inside. They passed through the empty kitchen to a small room in the back that Elena had never noticed. It was barely a storage closet, filled with dusty boxes and old utensils. "I worked here for 32 years, Jean-Pierre said as he moved boxes. "Long before the Sterlings bought this place. Long before you were born." He stopped in front of a rusty metal box, hidden behind sacks of flour. "When I met your mother, I was just a kitchen helper. Rose sometimes came with Mireille while she did translations for a businessman who dined here regularly. Your mother was extraordinary. She had that light that some people possess, that ability to make everyone around her feel special. Were you close? We were friends. Good friends. Rose had no one else but Mireille, and I was alone in the world too. We understood each other." Jean-Pierre opened the metal box with a small key he wore around his neck. Inside was a package wrapped in yellowed cloth, aged by time. "The night before Rose disappeared, she came to see me. She was scared, but also determined. She told me she had to leave, that she couldn't explain why, but that she needed to ask me a favor." Jean-Pierre's hands trembled as he unwrapped the package. "She gave me this. She made me swear I would keep it until her daughter was ready to receive it. She told me, when Elena is strong, when the world can no longer ignore her, then you will know it's time." Inside the package were 3 objects: a letter sealed with red wax, a small photograph, and a passport. Elena took the photograph first. In it, Rose, clearly pregnant, smiled at the camera with one hand on her belly. On the back of the photo, in elegant handwriting, was written, "For my Elena, the day I knew you would be my greatest gift." Tears began to fall before Elena could stop them. "The passport," Jean-Pierre pointed to the document. "Look at it." Elena opened it with trembling hands. It was a French passport, and the name that appeared was not Rose Dubois, it was Marie Logan. "Your mother had a false identity," Jean-Pierre explained. "She had gotten it months before she disappeared. I think she was planning to flee, to start a new life away from the Sterlings. But then, if she had everything ready, why didn't she take me with her? That, Miss Dubois, I think the letter explains." Elena looked at the sealed envelope. Her hands trembled so much she could barely hold it. Her whole life, all the unanswered questions, all the emptiness in her heart. Perhaps the answers were there, in that yellowed paper, waiting to be read. She broke the seal carefully, as if the envelope could disintegrate at any moment. Inside were several pages written in her mother's handwriting, The same handwriting she had seen in the letter Mireille kept Rose's handwriting. Elena began to read aloud, needing to hear her mother's words fill the silence. My dearest Elena, if you are reading this, it means the time has come. It means you are strong, that you are brave, that you are everything I always knew you would be. There are so many things I wish I could have told you in person, so many hugs I wish I could have given you, so many nights I wish I could have been there to comfort you when you cried. But life forced me to choose, and I chose your safety over my happiness. Arthur Sterling is your father. I don't know if you already know that when you read this, but I need you to understand it from my perspective. I loved him, Elena. I loved him with all my naive heart, and he, in his own twisted way, loved me too. But the love of men like him always has limits, and those limits are power and money. When I became pregnant, Arthur offered me money to disappear. I refused. I wanted him to recognize you, to give you your place. I was foolish to think his love was stronger than his ambition. Then his wife, Eleanor, discovered everything, and she was not like Arthur. She was dangerous. She threatened me directly. She told me that if I didn't disappear, she would make sure something bad happened to you, to my baby, to my Elena. I couldn't risk it. I couldn't put you in danger. So I made a deal. I would leave, disappear forever. In exchange, Eleanor promised that they would never touch you, that they would let you live in peace with your grandmother. Arthur accepted the deal, but with one condition. I could not take you with me. He said you were his blood, that he would not allow his daughter to grow up in poverty in some foreign country. It was the hardest decision of my life, Elena. Leaving you was like tearing my heart from my chest, but I did it because I loved you more than my own life. I left you with Mireille because I knew she would raise you with love, with values, with the strength I couldn't give you directly. I went to Montreal, took a new identity, built a new life, but never, not a single day, did I stop thinking about you. I never stopped loving you. I never stopped dreaming of the moment I could see you again. Years ago, when I learned Arthur had died, I thought about returning. But Maxwell already controlled everything, and he was worse than his father, more cruel, more ruthless. I was afraid of what he might do to you if I appeared. So I waited. I waited until you were strong enough to face them. I waited for the world to see who you really are. And if you are reading this, it means that moment has arrived. Elena, my love, my life, my reason for existing. I am alive. I have been alive all these years waiting for you. And if you want to find me, if you want to know me, if you can forgive me for leaving you, there is a place in Montreal, a small cafe on Plateau Mont-Royal called Le Coin Perdu. I go there every Sunday morning for 20 years. I always order the same thing, a café au lait and a croissant. I always sit at the same table by the window, and I always look towards the door, waiting for the day my daughter enters through it. I love you, Elena. I loved you from the moment I knew you existed. I will love you until my last breath. Your mother, Rose. Elena finished reading, and the silence that followed was absolute. Tears streamed down her face uncontrollably, falling onto the paper, mixing with words that had waited more than 2 decades to be read. Jean-Pierre was also crying unashamedly, not trying to hide it. She's alive, Elena whispered. My mother is alive. She always was, Miss Dubois, waiting for you, loving you from afar. Elena hugged the letter against her chest, feeling as if her mother's arms enveloped her across time and distance. At that moment, her phone rang. It was Chloe. Elena, we have the warrant. They opened the Sterling safety deposit box, and we found something you need to see urgently, something about your mother, something Maxwell hid for years. Elena looked at Jean-Pierre, then the letter, then the passport, with the name Marie Logan. I'm coming. Because her mother's letter had answered many questions. But what awaited in that safety deposit box would reveal that Rose Dubois' story was much more complex than anyone had imagined, and that Elena's journey was just beginning. The Sterling safety deposit box contained decades of secrets, documents of bribes, illegal contracts, evidence of shady deals that would shake any business empire. But none of that mattered to Elena at that moment. What mattered was a manila envelope with her name written in a hand she would now recognize anywhere, her mother's handwriting. Chloe handed it to her with careful hands. Maxwell kept this here for years. Apparently, Rose sent this letter to Arthur shortly before he died, asking him to deliver it to his daughter. He never did, and Maxwell decided to bury it along with all the other family secrets. Elena opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet and a recent photograph. In the image appeared a woman with graying hair, bright eyes, and a smile that was exactly like hers. Rose, her mother, alive, real, waiting for her. The letter was brief. My Elena, if you ever read this, I want you to know that I never stopped fighting for you. Every year on your birthday, I sent letters to your father asking him to deliver them to you. He never did, but I'm still waiting. I will always wait. Le coin perdu every Sunday until my heart stops beating. I love you, Mom. Elena looked at Chloe, then at Jean-Pierre, who had come with her, and finally made a decision that would change her life forever. I need to go to Montreal. The flight lasted hours that seemed like eternities. Mireille couldn't travel due to her health condition, but insisted that Elena go. Go, ma petite, she had told her in the hospital, holding her hands tightly. Go find my Rose. Tell her I forgive her. Tell her I never stopped loving her. And bring her back home. Chloe took care of everything. Tickets, hotel, contacts in Canada who would help if anything went wrong. The report on the Sterlings could wait. This was more important. It was Sunday when Elena arrived on the Plateau Mont-Royal in Montreal. The cobblestone streets shone under a spring sun. Artists painted on the corners. Musicians played melodies that floated in the air like promises. And there, on a narrow street, was the cafe her mother had mentioned. Le coin perdu, the lost corner. Elena stopped in front of the door, her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone around her could hear it. What if her mother wasn't there? What if she had stopped going? What if after so many years she no longer wanted to be found? But then she remembered Mireille's words. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is acting despite it. She pushed the door and entered. The cafe was small, cozy, with walls covered in old photographs, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling every corner. There were few people at that early hour. A young couple in a corner, an old man reading the newspaper, and by the window, at a table for two, a silver-haired woman looked towards the street with the expression of someone who had waited a lifetime. Elena couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but look at that woman who was her mother, who had sacrificed everything to protect her, who had spent more than 2 decades waiting for this moment. Then Rose turned her head, their eyes met, and the world stopped. Rose brought a hand to her chest, as if her heart threatened to burst out. Her lips trembled, forming a word that didn't quite come out. Tears began to roll down her cheeks as she slowly stood up, never taking her eyes off Elena. Elena, her voice was barely a whisper. My Elena, Mom. That single word broke the dam that held back decades of pain, of absence, of unexpressed love. Rose ran towards her daughter and enveloped her. Friendship that seemed to want to recover, all the lost embraces, all the goodnight kisses, all the tears she couldn't dry. My baby, Rose sobbed. My beautiful baby, you finally came, you finally came. Elena cried too, clinging to her mother as if she feared she would disappear again. I found you, Mom, I found you. They remained embraced for minutes that seemed like hours, while the other customers of the cafe watched, moved, not fully understanding what they were witnessing, but feeling the magnitude of the moment. When they finally separated, Rose took Elena's face in her hands, studying every detail, as if she wanted to memorize every line, every expression. You're beautiful, she whispered, more beautiful than I ever imagined. And those eyes, you have my eyes. And your smile, it's just like Grandmaman Mireille's. How is my mother? She's waiting for you. She's sick, but she's fighting. She wants to see you, Mom. She wants you to come home. Rose closed her eyes, fresh tears escaping. Can she forgive me? After I abandoned her? She forgave you a long time ago. She just wants to hug you one more time. They sat together at the table by the window, the same table where Rose had waited for 20 years. And they talked. They talked for hours, sharing stories, filling gaps, building bridges over the abyss of time that had separated them. Rose told about her life in Montreal, how she had worked as a translator using the languages Mireille had taught her, how she had built a small but dignified life, how every Sunday she came to this cafe hoping to see her daughter enter through that door. Elena told about her life, about Mireille raising her with unwavering love, about learning 7 languages, listening to her grandmother, about working as a waitress, being humiliated, and finally finding her voice. You answered him in French. Rose laughed through tears when Elena told the story. Of course you did. You're my daughter and Mireille's granddaughter, the 2 strongest women I know. As the sun began to set over Montreal, painting the sky with golden and pink hues, Rose took Elena's hands. And now what? Now you come home with me. Grandmaman needs you. I need you. There's no one left to hide from, Mom. The Sterlings are finished. Maxwell and Liam will face justice for everything they did, and you deserve to get your life back. Rose looked out the window at the city streets that had been her refuge for so long. I spent over 20 years fleeing, Elena, hiding, living half a life because the other half of my heart was with you. Can I really come back? Can I really start over? Not start over, Mom. Continue. Continue from where we were unfairly separated. Continue being a family. Weeks later, at the city's airport, Mireille waited in a wheelchair, surrounded by Chloe, Jean-Pierre, and the medical team who had insisted on accompanying her. When the international arrival's doors opened and Elena appeared, holding the arm of a silver-haired woman, the cry that escaped Mireille was purely primal, the sound of a mother finding her lost daughter. Rose ran to her, kneeling in front of the wheelchair, taking her mother's hands. "Mom, forgive me. Forgive me for leaving you. Forgive me for everything." Mireille hugged her with the little strength she had left, but with all the love she had held for decades. "There's nothing to forgive, ma petite. You're here. You're alive. That's all that matters." Elena watched the scene with tears streaming down her cheeks. 3 generations of Dubois women finally reunited. 3 women who had survived impossible losses, terrible injustices, and cruel separations, but who had never, ever stopped loving each other. Chloe published her report weeks later. The story of the Sterlings and their downfall was national news for months. Maxwell and Liam were convicted on multiple charges, losing not only their freedom, but the entire empire they had built on lies and cruelty. Jude's hospital was saved thanks to a coalition of ethical investors Chloe helped bring together. Mireille was able to continue her treatment without worries, now surrounded by her daughter and granddaughter. Elena received job offers from international translation agencies, prestigious universities, and humanitarian organizations that wanted to leverage her gift for languages. But she chose something different. She founded a free language school for disadvantaged youth, teaching in the same way Mireille had taught her, with patience, with love, with the certainty that knowledge is the most powerful weapon against injustice. She named it the Rose Mireille Dubois School. One spring afternoon, Elena was sitting in the garden of her new home, watching her mother and grandmother converse under the shade of a tree. Mireille laughed at something Rose said, a sound Elena thought she would never hear. Rose noticed her gaze and smiled, extending a hand towards her. "Come here, ma petite. Sit with us." Elena joined them, sitting on the grass between the 2 women she loved most in the world. "Do you know what I learned from all this?" she said softly. "What, my love?" Mireille asked. "That the most important language isn't French, or English, or any of the 7 I speak. The most important language is love, and that I learned from you." Rose and Mireille exchanged a look, their eyes shining with tears of happiness. "And you speak it perfectly, ma petite." Rose kissed her forehead. "You speak it perfectly." The sun set over the city, painting the sky with the same golden and pink hues Elena had seen in Montreal the day she found her mother. But now those colors had a different meaning. They were no longer the end of a day. They were the beginning of a new life. A life where 3 women the world had tried to separate were finally together. A life where truth had triumphed over lies. A life where love had conquered power. And that life, Elena knew with absolute certainty, was the best ending she could ever have imagined. Because it wasn't really an ending, it was the beginning of everything that always should have been.